it being 5:30 of the hour, I will call this meeting of the special council meeting of the town of Fort Frances to order, it being session number 45. We'll begin with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that the Rainy River District is covered by Treaty 3 with the Anishinaabe Nation. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest, and if so, state the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we will move to item 4.1, and just before we begin, I do once again want to thank our administration and staff. After our last budget meeting, they took our recommendations back and spent many hours going over them and looking at the possible effects of initiating some of them. So thanks for all that time and work that you put in there, administration. We really appreciate it. In a moment, I'm going to go to Dawn to go over item 4.1, that report. I would ask that we get through the whole report before we deal with questions. Okay, Dawn, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so I have created a little slideshow to keep us on track tonight. So I'm just going to bring it up. Maybe. There we go. There we go. Okay, so at the February 20th, 2024 special budget meeting, administration had presented a budget to council which proposed an increase of $877,736. So this version that is in front of you now shows a reduction in costs and increase in revenue projection of a total of $176,180 for total budget increase.
It's a 22 order day with no breaks, no lunch, and
$701,555 over 2023. So as you can see on the screen here, it's a little bit small, but council conferences and courses, we have reduced $10,000. So removing the $10,000, we will need to review the number of members attending NOMA, and as well that reduced there was $7,000 in there for each individual counselor for online training. The DSAB levy has an increase of $9,998 per the DSAB final budget. The revitalization grants, we've increased by $10,000 due to the increase in eligibility and the value for this grant. Solar panels, salaries and benefits is increased $2,310. This was missed from our original submission. Senior center contribution from seniors, we've increased the revenue $10,000. This consists of lunches, pool players, coffee sales, etc. Senior center cleaning, salaries and benefits, a reduction in the cost of $12,294, so a reduction in cleaning hours. Marina dock rentals, increased revenue of $1,830. This is based on user fee increases, which are in Nathan's report later in this agenda, as well as the marina launch fees and increased revenue of $1,000. And then marina, the Ministry of Natural Resources rent, 10% of gross revenues. We've increased that cost by $300 based on this increased revenue. The next green section is a total of $6,300 $354, which is all relating to the summer ice. And that was per the direction at the February 20th meeting. This increase is just the revenue over and above what was budgeted for August previously. So I have a placeholder here for library changes of 31,000, which was a reduction of 5%. You can see I do have a note in the report which states that the library said they were having trouble achieving that, and we can discuss that after as well. The fire supply shop, we have reduced by $4,500, which is to remove the 2 exhaust fans for the IB&T building. Because the next line, we're reducing by $29,000 to remove the annual lease that was once in there. Instead, you will see on the capital projects, there is a purchase for $17,000 for a cabinet for the dryer. The next line you see is the court security grant, an increase of $2,838. There's roads, contracted services. Although we reduced all of the hired trucks, we did have a slight bill this year where we did move some snow. So $2,320 is added back in. Landfill salaries and benefits, this $13,801 is the new roll that was approved at the February 20th meeting. And then the next line is just reducing the transfer to the landfill reserves as a result of balancing out the landfill and recycling. Building permits, we do know that we are planning to receive an extra $100,000 in the building permit, so we did place that as revenue in the line here. And then Point Park materials and grounds, we moved $5,000 from the original trees budget over to capital in order to use the reserves for that. So total changes, 176,180. So total operating budget increase, 701,555.
Thank you very much for that report, Dawn. And also, while I remember, thank you for putting this material out in a very readable form for those of us with elder eyes.
You're welcome.
So, councilors, discussion, questions, comments. Councilor Behan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to first talk about the positives. I want to echo Mayor Halakis in saying I really commend the administration for finding that $176,180 in cuts. I'm glad to see there was an alternate option to leasing the IB&T building, albeit I do recognize there's a cost of $17,000 in the capital budget. I'm glad to see the increased revenue at the Sorting Gap Marina and Sister Kennedy Center, as well as a cut in the janitorial costs at the Sister Kennedy Center. What I'm speaking of now is that I am very opposed to the full 5% cut to the library budget. I can support the roughly 2.3% cut that was proposed by the library board at a special emergency meeting last Wednesday that I and Councillor Olson attended, as long as the town reps for the board, as well as Mayor Halakis as the ex officio board member. I can say that the cuts that we are proposing at 2.3 includes reducing the hours of the library from 55 a week to 50, not filling a student shelver position, as well as several other cuts to various budget lines throughout the budget. So the cuts total $14,178.68, which is, as it said, $16,821 less than what administration had asked the library to do. I just want to say that I think that going any further than that would result in very drastic, if not draconian, impacts to the library in terms of the programs and services they can offer to our community. I can't stress enough the value of the library to our community, and I think it's very important that we do our very best to keep it going and all the wonderful programs and services they offer. If the CEO gave us a report earlier in the week that 87% of the library's budget is uncontrollable costs, 13% is directly controlled by the library. So if you're looking at that $16,821, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, much of money, But if I look at it, if my calculations are correct, that's about 22% of what the controllable costs are that the library can affect. So again, I think it's very too drastic on the library to go that full 5%. So I'm seeking the rest of council's support to keep it at what the library board has suggested, and that would mean that it would increase the deficit from 701,555 to 718,376. But perhaps you can find other savings to sort of compensate that. But that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bien. CAO Rob?
Thank you, through the chair. Just when we're talking about the library, I did a little bit of research on library costs around the district. And we have the highest per capita costs for operating a library of 6 municipalities in the district, including a couple of municipalities that operate 2. And we're highest by 25%. In addition to that, over the last 12 years, so from 2012 to 2024, the library budget has increased by just shy of 30%. In comparison, the overall town operating budget has increased by 3.5%. Of that 3.5% budget increase, almost 20% of it was due to the library increases. So all that being what it is a substantial component of our operating budget, and all of our other areas are taking a hit so that the library doesn't have to take a hit. And at some point in time, there's got to be a balance here. Thank you.
Further questions or comments, councillors? Oh, Councillor Brunetta?
Is this in regards to Mike's
Yes.
statement?
Still in the library.
No, I'm
Okay. Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Are we going to deal with the report in item 5 or 4.2 next?
We can.
Okay. I just, if I could just make a comment on this portion of the presentation. Last council meeting, we supported a resolution from Prescott Russell that that in simple terms, that the province isn't sharing the wealth with municipalities to cover the costs of service in areas of provincial responsibility that are being borne by towns such as ours. Now, a provincial policy that does help us for at least a year in recycling is being directed fully to reserves. I understand that we have a large outlay for our landfill facility that's coming in the near future, and reserves do need to be built for that eventuality. But what I'd like to suggest is that local taxpayers be rewarded a little bit of that provincial policy change, and that maybe we take 15% out of the transfer to reserves for landfill, and put the remaining 85% into those reserves. It would mean $50,000 that we could reward our local businesses and residents with in a reduction in taxes.
Okay, I was going to ask you to hold on to that thought, because I kind of like to get to deal with these items one at a time. So we still haven't left the library. I'd like to get a flavor of where the council sits on the library. Do we want them to make further cuts, or are we satisfied with the cuts that they made? I'll give you a little bit of history. The library is expensive to operate, but you have to look at what you're getting from it. It's a jewel, it's a gem of our community. And when we have visitors, it's one of the first places that people take guests from out of town to have a look at. They also provide invaluable services to all of the demographics in our community, but in particular to seniors and younger people. And they provide a safe space for many of the beleaguered demographics in our community. Just for interest, when the library first moved into that building many years ago, it was open 70 hours a week, and it's been gradually whittled down. And now I think, if, as Mike said, they're taking another 5%, another 5-hour cut to try to save some money. So I think what the community has to think about and what council has to think about is how important is the library and its services and the programming that it provides to you. The CAO makes a good point that we do have a vast amount of other services that we provide, and some of those are taking a cut in order to support the library. So it boils down to really how important are the services that the library provides to our community and our residents. My personal feelings is that they are very, very important, but I'm one of 7. I want to make sure everyone else has had a chance to speak. Councillor Bean, before I go back to you. Councillor Bernetta.
I tend to agree that the library is definitely a valuable resource in our community. And it's not the only one that is subsidized by taxpayer dollars. Obviously, many of our facilities are, including the Sportsplex. So I appreciate that the library board has gone back to the table and found areas that they could find efficiencies in. And perhaps this is a good time for all of our departments to think about the coming year, to start planning for ways to find efficiencies, because I don't think this is going to get better. I think all of our departments are going to be feeling the pinch in the next year and years to come. So I think that I'm happy with what the library board has come back with, and I'm hoping as we go through this process tonight, we'll find other areas where we can find savings.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Bien, any other councillors wish to speak? I have Councillor Olson and then our CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak to the library also, since that's the discussion of this evening. And I want to clarify something first. So the ask that was brought to the board wasn't a 5% cut, it was up to. And I think Councillor Behan spoke to the controlled and uncontrolled expenses. And when we look at that in the grand scheme of things, it really is a very small amount of the budget. One thing I did make a note on, and I will go back to the library CEO, CAO, to ask him, is specifically the fee for service for cost per service user. I know just being on the board in the last year, we've seen a substantial increase in the amount of people being serviced over at the library, and that's just in programming numbers. That's not in individuals coming in the door. So when I look at this and I recognize that, it is a service that comes at a cost to the community, I look to the community of what service gaps is this service filling. We don't have a youth center. We don't have a safe place for young and old and in between to come together, a space that has, safety, but also resources for those attending post-secondary school. The library has worked really hard to establish some relationships in the community to help pick up the slack with other communities that are losing their libraries and kind of filling that gap. So I think it's far larger than what most of us maybe see. And that's the plus, I guess, in being a service user and a parent and a family in the community, that is a place where even my own children can go and have those experiences. And so I just wanted to speak to that briefly tonight and just kind of pick up where Councillor Behan left off, that the ask was up to 5%, and I feel like 2% is fair without cutting services anymore. I think it will impact the community.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. CAO Rob?
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to respond to Councillor Burnett's comment about the other service areas looking at efficiencies over the next 12 months. We're there. We've done this. I think the next 12 months, council needs to decide what service level they want to give to the community. because there's no more fat to cut. It's been cut. So there's no efficiencies to find.
Thank you, CEO Rob. Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Quick point I'll make is that the library, unfortunately, is not a very big revenue generator, just by its mandate and how it's offering programs to everybody, and cost isn't a factor. So that's part of the thing, is we don't generate a lot of revenue, and we obviously have lots of expenses. What I would ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to our treasurer, Madam Treasurer, for information purposes and for further discussion, I think last week I'd asked if you could maybe calculate what the difference would be from a 701,555 deficit to 718,376, which was the 16,821 from the library, in terms of what that would be in terms of the impact of the budget. So right now we're looking at 5.7, going up to 718,376. What would that mean in terms of overall tax? We're looking at 7.85 or 5.85 or something like that. Do you have that number? So we just can see what the actual cost would be to absorb that $16,000. Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
Chair, I actually didn't do that calculation because I figured there'd be more discussion here today, which will trigger the numbers. I could have done, 80 different scenarios, but I didn't figure it was worth my time at that point. However, once we get to a final, okay number tonight, or if we do, I will certainly run that quickly and give an update. So about $120,000 in increase equates to 1%. Just for.
Thank you. Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Worship. And I'm not sure that either of the council reps on the library can answer this, but have any additional revenue streams been looked at as a possibility? Councillor Bien refers to the lack of revenue, and
I don't know if either councillor. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I can say that we're always looking to increase our revenues as best we can. There's always options we're trying to look at. Our room rental is one of the biggest ones we have in terms of generating revenue, the Shaw room rental, and there's others too. But I can say that for myself, personally speaking, I'm always looking to see if we can find ways to increase our revenue without sort of violating that mandate that it's open to all, no matter what their financial status may be, or how, their station in life type of thing. So that's trying to weigh that with trying to find source of revenue, but it is difficult. Thank you.
I would like to make one last point. I always admire our treasurer because she's always so astute with financial dollars and very practical in how things are applied. And she made a really good suggestion. She said, well, perhaps some of that could be offset with donations. I do want to speak to that. Our library has been very fortunate, and it's an indication of its population and popularity and value to the community, in that over the years they have received many substantial bequests. But I think a little bit of history here, again, is important. I've been on the library board for many, many, many years, over many councils. And not all councils have been as supportive of the library as this particular council. In fact, I recall some councillors speaking in public about the need for the library and the need for the expense. And what that did was that prompted people donating to the library, particularly with bequests, to specify specifically in their bequests that the money was not to be used for operating budgets. We got one very large bequest, I'm not going to name names, where they said, we don't want this to be used for the operating budget, but we do want it to be used for technology because it's a library and technology center. And then we've got other bequests where they said, under no circumstances is this to be used for operating budgets. However, in the case where money is freely given and it's up to the library, then those dollars could be used for operating, but we don't typically get a lot of that. I'm just going to make a comment here. By my count, we have 4 councillors who are in favor of no further cuts to the library. I'm just looking at them and they're nodding. So I would say then that we will not further cut the library in this budget, and the amount that has been found by the library board will stand. Any further comments or questions about that? Yes, Councillor Bernetta?
Can I just make a suggestion that we go through the table as provided in that order, just so we aren't all over the place?
Certainly. But I do have Councillor McTaggart's comment and request hanging out there, so I'll go back to you, Councillor McTaggart. Do you just want to quickly remind Council of your suggestion?
Thank you, Your Worship. My suggestion is simply that we take the transfer to the landfill reserve of 336 and take 15% of that and apply it to the budget, 85% of it going to the reserves for future needs for landfill expansion.
Thank you. I'll put that out on the floor then. CAO Rob, I knew that we would be here. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So fundamentally, in terms of reserves, particularly this one with the revenue we're receiving from recycle, it's definitely something we could do, but it's not a save for the community. All it is it's pushing your tax increase down the road. This revenue is a 2-year thing. After that, it's gone. So if we reduce our tax increase today by utilizing this revenue source, we're not saving the taxpayer. All we're doing is pushing down the line of when that tax increase is going to hit.
Thank you, CAO Rob. Any other councillors want to weigh in on this? Seeing none? Moving on then, still though on item 4.1. Councillor Bernetta, what was your suggestion again?
Just that we start at the top, because there's a issue that needs to be discussed regarding the reduction for council, the council budget, and that we need to discuss members going to NOMA. I don't know if you wanted that answer tonight, Madam Treasurer. No? Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking as we go down, there's several different items that I'd like to comment on, but I thought we could keep it in order.
And you certainly may. So do you want to start with that one? Would you like to speak to that?
No, the treasurer has indicated she doesn't need an answer tonight, so
okay.
That's fine.
So, Councillor Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I know this may not affect this year, given that we've already committed to AMO to go, the 3 councillors. I believe, I don't know if we bought plane tickets yet, but I think we booked hotels and maybe we've registered.
Yeah.
Going forward, though, I'm wondering, is it essential that council goes to both Roma and AMO every year? Or can we pick one or the other? Or maybe we alternate years. 1 year we go to Roma, 1 year we go to AMO, then we go back to Roma. So I'm just wondering if that's something going forward that we can consider as a way to save some money, is that not go to both conferences each year, but maybe choose one or the other or alternate or something like that. That's just throwing that out there for a comment or suggestion.
Well, I'll go to you in just in a moment, Councillor Bernetta. The alternative to that is to take less people and go to both. Councillor Bernetta?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would agree that when we apply for delegations to the ministers at the conferences, we may not be accepted for one at AMO or Roma or vice versa, but we have the opportunity to apply again at the other one. So I would suggest that perhaps we would reduce it to one councillor, the mayor and the CAO for Roma and AMO, so that's 2 less people per year. That's what I would suggest.
I would agree with that. Any further discussion on this item? Okay. Just kind of moving down. I'm not going to read them all off, but councillors, you can speak as in order of the items if you're concerned about them. Councillor Bernetta, you had mentioned you had several. What would your next one be?
Well, I wonder if anyone has comments on the senior center changes.
Senior Center?
I don't personally.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. That's why I was questioning if we're going to handle this under 4.2 or not. But in terms of the increases at the senior center, we're looking at some. We're looking at some significant increases in meal costs and memberships. When we're talking about some of the meal costs, remember these are seniors portion meals. They're not big full-blown meals that we're dealing with. But I'm concerned that, as noted in the report, that the membership portion of the senior center, I'm thinking is going to be a logistical nightmare. Who has membership, who pays daily, who gets discounts on meals. The success of the senior center is largely driven by volunteers. And I'm afraid that, and these are really committed volunteers, and I'm afraid it's going to possibly put a lot of pressure on them to sort this out. So the meal increases are substantial, particularly in the special meal where it goes from $5 to $12. So I really would ask the logic behind it and where we're headed with this.
I thank you for that, Councilor McTaggart, and I beg your pardon and your patience because we'll let the manager speak to that in the next agenda item, if that's all right with you. Councilor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I'd like to talk about briefly recreational facilities. When this was brought to our last special budget meeting, I believe for the full 8 weeks of summer, the loss was pegged around $5,200, give or take. Pardon my math, but I've done it 3 or 4 times, and if I made a mistake, I sincerely apologize. But when I look at it now, $32,400 is the extra revenue we're looking at, and I subtracted all the extra expenses we're looking at. I came up with $63.54, an $1,100 difference. So I'm just curious which new figure is this new figure the one that's correct, and can we maybe still try to recoup that as we try and book more race time? That's the only thing I noticed. Thank you.
Does anyone want? Nathan? Manager Young?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you through the chair. When we wrote that report and we had the roughly $5,200, when we went to plug the numbers into the budget software, that's where we started to get the actual cost when we factor in CPP, EI, employer benefits and such. And so you are correct in noticing that there was that difference from the reports to what's showing up on the actualities. At this point here, we are over 30% towards our anticipated goal for our April 15th date. And ice sales are going very well. And so that difference in those budget lines, I do believe that we are going to hit this target and potentially exceed it.
Thank you. Further questions? Comments? Moving on then, Councilor Bernetta?
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the same comments, Councillor Vian. I'd like to talk for a minute about the museum launch fees. Sorry, the marina launch fees. Also, this is in 4.2, so I don't know if you want to wait for that. Mary.
Let's do all that together, and Nathan can do his report.
Right.
But I'll still stay with you. Further issues?
I think the only other thing I had was I had a question about the trees at the Point Park. The original amount given to us was $10,000, and I suggested it be taken from reserves, but now I see $5,000 is going from to be moved over to reserves, but there's still a balance of $3,500, and so that's a total of $8,500. So I'm just wondering what the discrepancy is there, and why is the whole amount not being moved?
Manager Miller?
Thank you, and through the chair, the portion that was moved to come out of capital reserves is the portion that we will hire an external contractor to do the work. The other portion will be undertaken by town crews, so it will just come out of operating.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my next question is the roads and contracted services. I thought we had removed the cost of hired trucks for snow removal, but then I see there's a 2320, and I see year-to-date, so is that something we've already spent and we had recorded? Is that why it's there? Thank you.
We'll go back to Manager Miller.
Through the chair, the week that we removed snow removal from the budget, it was their first week of night shift. We had hired trucks because our trucks were actually out of service at the time. Our trucks were being worked on by mechanics and shops, so we actually had to hire trucks that week to do the snow removal for the town.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bean, yep.
Just a one-off then, Mr. Miller, like it won't happen again? It's like now the rest of it's out of the budget? Is that what my
Go
understanding?
ahead.
That is correct. We will not be hiring any trucks.
Okay. Councillor Taggart.
To be clear, we're going to cover the sorting gap in
Yes.
4.2.
Yes. Yep. Any other items on this list, councillors, that you would like to speak to? Okay, we're going to move on. Okay. All right, I was just conferring with my betters here because we did have a resolution on the agenda to approve the operating budget as presented, and there's been some changes. So we'll go through the rest of the agenda and then see if council has a desire to come back to another meeting to get the changes all incorporated. So oh, okay. Who's going to speak to that? Back to 4.1 and Dawn.
So, through the chair, although the water and sewer budget does just balance out, I do have this in the agenda as well. So because we had added that new role, you do see that there is an increase in both the water and the sewer side of things for the new role. As well, we did adjust the sale of water and the sale of sewer disposal based on the new rates that were previously approved, and then it balances to the reserve. So everything that's to zero there, but I just wanted to present it so that you'd know what the updated figures are.
And thank you for that, Madam Treasurer. Councilor, did you have any questions or comments on that?
Okay, so the next pages in your agenda are just the summary pages that were basically the front few pages of our previous package. I'm not going to go through them because we just talked about all the highlights. So I know there will be changes, but what we've presented here today is the tax rates summary. So you see what the impact is if we did go with the 701,555 increase. The increase to the municipal rate would be 5.73%. And then since the education rate does not change, the increase on the residential is 5.35%. You can see here that across the top, the tax ratios are there. Because the multi-residential is over the 2.0 threshold for multi-residential, they actually don't see an increase in the tax rate. We do still have the commercial banding in place. So from 0 to 3.6 million is the low band rate, and then over 3.6 million is the high band rate. There are 3 or 4 properties in town which do get to that high band rate. You can also see here that the industrial and large industrial ratios are the same. Any questions?
Councillors, any comments or questions? Councillor Brunetta?
Could you explain the large industrial and industrial change? I'm not understanding it.
So do you mean, sorry, through the chair, do you mean the change because we changed it in the last couple of years? So previously, large industrial was much higher. I'm going to say it was 6 point something was the ratio. So over the last 22 and 23, we did reduce it down to the industrial rate. Is that what you mean by?
Yeah, I think, well, just in your report, you mentioned that there was a change. So I wasn't quite sure what you were meaning.
Let me see what I wrote. I'm sorry. If I can find where I put it.
It's just a line that says the most notable change is the large industrial assessment being moved to
Oh.
industrial.
Sorry. That's the assessment itself. So previously, the mill property was all, or majority large industrial. In 23, we received 357, which actually changed it to industrial. And it actually went back to 22 as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? I'll just make a comment. So the percentage tax increase, which is what everyone is interested in, was with the educational taxes 5.35%, but that's not taking into account the fact that council has decided that they don't want to increase the library, so that'll make that higher.
Correct.
Just so people know that it will be higher than 5.35%.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on item 4.1, councillors? Okay, so that brings us to item 4.2, which is something that many of us have been waiting for.
Sorry, there's more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's more in the agenda.
Oh, sorry.
In 4.1, it's kind of stacked.
Carry on.
Carry on? Okay. So each year, we like to bring forward this analysis of the CPI and the tax rates over the last 10 years or so. So I just prepared that for you today. The Ontario CPI for 2023 was 3.4%. So significantly lower than what we have seen in the past couple of years after the COVID days. So this year we are presenting a higher tax rate increase than previous. In many years we have discussed a tax rate increase of the 3.4 plus the the Ontario CPI plus the 1.4% from the asset management plan being kind of an increase that would be reasonable for any year. So I will admit we are above that this year.
Questions, comments? Councillors?
We are above that.
Anything further?
So the next part is the assessment roll comparison. So again, every year I just bring forward so that council is aware of how our assessment roll has changed from year to year. So you will see there's a little green line on there, large industrial taxable. So that's where that note that Councillor Brunetta was asking about. You can see the change. It was at the time of roll 2023, 1.77 million. And then now for 2024, it is 0. We do have a little bit of an increase though in some of the assessment over the year. Some commercial has gone up as well as some of the residential. And then the final, I believe, schedule in this 4.1 package is just the taxation analysis. So again, each year I like to bring the same things forward just so that council and the media are familiar with what we're bringing. This shows the dollar impact of that $701,000 increase on each of the tax classes. So you can see the residential tax class shows the majority of the increase of $496,492 with 3,075 properties, which is essentially all of the residential properties increasing. The average change for each property is $161. The median change is $142.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, going back to the asset management plan. I know we're trying to increase it, not increase it 1.4% every year. I'm wondering, is this the year when we maybe look at not increasing it as much? And I'm just wondering, is there any appetite at the council table to do that? If we just do 1% increase, we're still putting in $2.3 million. We're just not putting in the full 173,000. I'm thinking 100,000. That'll save us $73,000. I understand the argument that this Mr. CEO put out that we're putting it down the road. I'm just thinking that when they put out the asset management plan, they didn't foresee a day when we'd have a $922,000 increase in uncontrollable costs. And I'm wondering is there any, I know the importance of reserves, don't get me wrong, but is this the year where we can just play with that a little bit and not put in the full 1.4%? I'm just wondering what the appetite is at the rest of council to see if we can give our taxpayers a break there this year. Anyway, thank you.
I'm not even going to ask. I'm going right to the CAO.
It's like you could read my mind. So I look back over the last 6 years, and over the last 6 years, our average spend out of our reserves has been just over $4 million. Over that same 6 years, our average contribution to reserves has been under $2 million. This year, we're forecasted to spend 3.3. We're putting in 2.3, so we're $1 million short. Over the last 6 years, our accumulated shortfall, our average shortfall has been $2 million per year every single year. What we're doing with our reserves right now, without reducing our contribution, is unsustainable. So we have Sunny Cove that's closed because the building's unsafe to be in. We have the pool that's closed because the building is unsafe to be in. Wright Avenue North, we had to rip up the surface and put it to gravel because we could no longer maintain it. We've got 50% of our traffic signals in town that have no replacement parts. When one fails, that's it, no more traffic signals. Our frontline plow truck spent most of the winter broke down, and we had no snow for it to plow, still broke down. Last winter, it also spent most of the winter broke down. We have a grader that's scheduled to be floated to Thunder Bay for substantial repairs. And again, frontline plow piece of equipment. It's all well and good to look at that as a revenue opportunity. It's really no different than the landfill. It's not saving anybody any money. It's just pushing the problem down the road to the next building that we have to close because it's unsafe. The next piece of equipment we have to park because it's unsafe. The next service level, the next legal obligation that we can't meet because we don't have the equipment to do it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just noticed that in 2023 we had budgeted, I think, 2.1 million to contribution reserves. The actual was 2.3 million, if I'm not mistaken. Is there a chance that our reserves will increase just because of the circumstances change over the course of the year, and our actuals may actually be higher than what we're budgeting? Or is there a chance it could also be lower? Thank you.
Anyone? Madam Treasurer?
So as of right this minute, we actually have a deficit for 2023 of about $180,000. In saying that, though, we do have surpluses from 21 and 22 that I haven't done anything with, that I will eventually, once we iron out 23, I will eventually bring a report forward, likely to clean it all up and put to reserves. So there may be an additional 200,000-300,000 that we would eventually put to reserves. At this point, we're not far enough through 2023's year end to tell you anything firm, but that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Councilor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, again, we've traditionally put in reserves. We can't use that surplus to help the operating budget. Yeah, I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that?
Sure, I'll comment. My comment each and every year is I don't suggest it. I do have a presentation I can bring up and talk through if you want, but basically all we are doing then is really delaying, and we're not solving the problem. We're just putting a Band-Aid on it for this year. So I strongly suggest against it.
I will make a comment on that. If you look back over the years, and if you look at increases to property taxes, some of them have been like very low or zero. And in good times, that was when we, or councils of those times, should have been putting away for the future. The temptation is to take your reward now and not put stuff away for the future, and then you end up paying for it down the road. And that's what's happening now. Because we didn't put money away in the past, we're paying that price right now. So I take what the CAO and the Treasurer says certainly as a good warning. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Chair. And this isn't going to be a liked comment, I don't think, at this table, but I think it's something that that we do need to talk about and bring up, which is the Point Park litigation and the substantial amount of money that was invested in litigation coming from taxpayer dollars. And I know it's going to be a hot topic with a lot of people at the table, but again, we're probably looking at a deficiency in that line item again this year. And it's something I think we need to talk about, considering it was $250,000 last year and the year before. And that's a substantial, when you're saying every 120,000 is 1% of the budget, that's over 2% of our taxpayers' dollars annually invested into litigation. And I think it's a real conversation we need to have at this table.
We will be having that conversation. It's my intent at some point in the future, the relatively near future, to call a special meeting of council to have that conversation. But this isn't the time and place for it right now. But thank you. We will be having that conversation. Further questions or comments before I try once again to move to item 4.2? I think that I'm going to get there. Okay, so item 4.2 then, Recreation and Culture proposed budget updates, and we have Manager Young here to speak to that. Go ahead, Manager Young.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Council through the Chair. The report here is a report to be received as information, and I've been listening to the questions and the comments that are coming up within the different areas that are outlined in this report. And I just want to remind Council as we go into this conversation that these are all starting point conversation pieces. So the information that is put into the report is a potential option that we can look at. The report is not written as this is the way forward. It's just to allow council to consider that if we did increase the lunch fees, this would be the impact on the revenues. If we did put our time into pushing our facility sales, this could be the potential impact. If we increased our launch fees by a certain amount, it could be the potential impact. So all of these items do need to be confirmed through our user fee bylaw before we are able to implement them. And so right now, administration is looking for the comfort level of council within these pieces, higher, lower, some pieces yes, some pieces no, so that we know what direction to move forward in as we go through the year.
Thank you. And I'll go to Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Are any of the proposed changes in this report reflected in the budget page that we see before us this evening?
Go ahead, Manager Young.
Yes, through the chair. So we did do I believe it was a $10,000 increase in revenues to the Sister Kennedy Center. And I believe that we were projecting around a $3,500 increase to the Sorting Gap Marina. So again, the goal to hit those numbers to get this tax line, and then we can figure out how we're going to get to that goal based on this information.
Thank you. Councillor McTaggart, follow up.
Thank you. Just in return, in regards to the Sorting Gap Marina launch fees, and I think Councillor Burnett actually was ahead of me on that one, so I'll yield to her.
Okay, Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I was quite surprised to see the launch fees double. I'm concerned that if we go from just over $9 a launch to up to 18 something, we are going to see less and less people using the launches. So I don't see that it would equate to the revenue projections that you're suggesting. People can launch at, the towers for free. Granted, it's not as nice, and there's no dock. I do think that we could increase them minimally. I think we should be more than Taylor's Cove. I think that's the most relevant comparator in our area, and they're at $10. And I believe that our marina is a nicer launch than Taylor's Cove, although I haven't been there for many years. So I could see that, and I don't mind a small increase. I guess I had a question. Were these amounts already increased per our user fee approvals? So if we've already increased them, then I would not approve the annual fees to be increased. But the independent, like the individual launch fees, I could see increasing a small bit. The other thing I was wondering about was the the parking that you mentioned in your report, charging parking at the marina, and the fact that launch fees individually or annually would include parking. So my question just was about how you would monitor that. I guess they would get something to put on their dash or something, but still, how, if someone came to buy ice cream, for example, and parked, would somebody run out and tell them they had to pay parking? That's the part I didn't quite understand.
Manager Young, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I'm going to defer this one on to CAO Rob.
Okay.
Thank you. So in terms of parking, the reason that we targeted adding parking in with the boat launch pass is, number one, having that purchase of the boat launch is an easy way to monitor the parking piece. And secondarily to that, the area where the people that are launching their boats are parking is outside of the beach management area. So that revenue wouldn't be tied to the beach management agreement. So we wouldn't have to give the 10% for that. So it's a good, I guess, easy way to increase the revenue that we keep versus part of it that we give away. It's not a huge change, but it is a little bit. I'm a seasonal launch pass holder, and my truck spends most of its time there. My boat is at the launch for 5 minutes. It makes sense that we're collecting some revenue for having the parking. So not necessarily looking to have someone that's stopping for ice cream pay for parking. That's not the intent of all of this. The intent is for those longer duration people that are parking there to pay a parking fee.
Thank you, CEO Rob. Over to you, Mr. Councilor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I looked at the numbers in the report And I'm absolutely shocked that there's only 23 annual passes for launching and 133 daily passes sold in 2023. And I see the number of vehicles that are there parked on weekends, and we're not getting the income that's due to us. And we have to balance having people there to monitor it versus the income, and I don't think we can justify having people there all the time. But do we have any method for those that do want to honestly pay to deposit in a drop box or something? I've paid my particular launch fee. Is one question, and I'm concerned too, as Councillor Bernetta had mentioned, that of putting our launch fees up so high that people will find other access points on the lake and our numbers will just go down, so that we have to strike that fair balance in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McTaggart. Manager Young?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. To Councilor McTaggart, I wanted to just highlight that at our last meeting that we were talking about this, we had reminded about the transition that we went through with the sorting gap last year, and recognizing that there was some deficiencies in the administration due to Rec and Culture passing to ONF and not having a supervisor at the marina. And so those are steps that we're taking to ensure that people are paying their launch fees, as well as making the launch fees purchasable through our ActiveNet software so that they can be purchased online. So administration is taking those steps to ensure that we are catching the individuals that are launching and paying their dues.
Thank you. I'll go to Councilor Behan and then Councilor Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I did look at the marina hours too for 2024, and I'm not the expert, Mr. Young, you are, in terms of how you manage your staff and what the hours are, but May to June, noon to 8 p.m., July to August, noon to 10 p.m. Again, I'm worried about what Councillor Bernetta brought up before about how you catch these people who are just using the launch when it's not manned. But is that the best hours we can offer? Nothing in the morning and just open till noon, and 10 o'clock to me seems kind of late, but I don't know. I just wondering that struck me as something to question. I just was throwing out there is why those hours were chosen. Thank you.
Manager Young?
Yes, thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Behan. We can definitely look at changing these hours to what council would like to see. The May to June piece is ensuring that we are open for 8 hours because of the full-time position that is being brought into that role. And so if we wanted to see that shift to earlier in the morning, then that means that we wouldn't be able to be open as later into the evening, because the majority of our marina staff in the summer are high school students and don't have an availability to extend those hours. But we can definitely change these hours based on what council would like to see. Off of last year's sales reports, having the marina open later into the evening went alongside the events that were run down on Front Street and at the marina, and trying to capitalize on some of those items. Manager Miller had mentioned that staying open until 10 p.m. Maybe 9 p.m. is a good compromise, but we're still trying to set that balance because we didn't have that full year of intention overseeing the marina last year. So we're open to making those changes as council wishes.
Thank you, Manager Young. Councilor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, 133 daily passes for the entire summer and 23 seasonals, I think, is substantially low. So my thought is that perhaps some kind of informational campaign, a promotion, trying to get those people that do utilize it to actually step forward to pay. Now, as far as the hours working and not having anybody there to get those people to pay in the mornings, perhaps some kind of surveillance camera of sort that can pick up the license plate of the vehicle, the boat identification, so that if they don't pay, we have some record that they were there to have a conversation down the road to entice them to buy a yearly pass. And last, parking. like our CAO suggested, he was there for 5 minutes, but the vehicle's there for 4 days. So perhaps some sort of parking needs to be established to generate some revenues there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackey. Any further questions, comments? Oh, Manager Hughes.
Thank you, through the chair. Just to speak on the camera situation, we did upgrade the surveillance system at the marina some years ago prior to our leasing endeavors at the marina. And there is a camera trained on the dock that's designed to allow us to pick up license plates, and it's been there for some time.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? So again, just a little sidebar on moving forward. I have a resolution that's going to say that council receives the report as information, but it appeared that there were some changes that councilors would like to see. I think the main thing out of the report is that there are increases to revenue, and that revenue is showing up in the budget. So I think council needs to decide before we move on if you're satisfied with that revenue staying in the budget, or do you want to see it changed? And if so, then how? Councilor Bernetta?
I'd like to propose that the daily launch fees increase from $9.24 to $10. If we see a large decrease in the number of daily launches, then, and I doubt that we would, just a small increase, but I definitely wouldn't agree to 18. And then I would agree with the seasonal launch fee to an even $75. That's makes sense to me.
Councilors, how do you feel about Councilor Burnetta's suggestion that I'm getting a thumbs up from Councilor McTaggart? Yeah, so consensus is that we go with an increase in launch fees from $9 to $10. Anyone vehemently opposed to that? Okay, were there any other changes in the revenue that you wanted to see made? Councilor McTaggart. That's revenue from 4.2.
Yeah, Sister Kennedy revenue. I think that some of the meal increases may be a little, and if are we introducing membership fees? And if we are there discounts for meals? And I think I think we're opening a whole big issue here that's going to be hard to manage and really difficult on our manager over there.
Councilor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I concur with Councillor McTaggart on all of what he said. Let's keep in mind that whole place is run on a $65,000 budget and run by volunteers. There's no town staff working this. And I would like to think that the people that are working there would have some input into this proposal here as to bumping food prices up and the rates, what have you. Thank you.
Manager Young.
Thank you, through the chair. Just wanted to make a comment to Councillor McTaggart that in the budget we have put a revenue increase of $10,000, And when we look at the proposed items of the increase on the lunches, this is accumulation of about $65,000 in increase with these higher numbers. So again, by taking the lunch from $5 to $12 and the special lunches from $5 to $8, sorry, I said that the wrong way. Special lunches $5 to $12 and regular lunches $5 to $8, that would be a substantial increase. So if we start to increase those at smaller amounts, then we can still achieve that $10,000 revenue increase that is reflected in the budget. If we wanted to go all the way to the maximum, there's a potential of almost $60,000 here just on lunches. In terms of the membership fees, administration does agree that without the staff support, bringing in a membership to the senior center is going to be a hard project to bring forward. However, that information is there for council to consider as we move into these conversations in future years throughout the term of council, that this might be a project that we want to look at bringing in future years when we're having these same budget conversations.
Okay. Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying this and understand this fully. If we don't agree with some of the changes that are suggested, we're still going to have that $10,000 in revenue that's projected increase in the operating budget, and then what you're looking at is on top of that, all these other fees, or I'm not quite sure. Or if we don't make these changes, that $10,000 is lost. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Manager Young.
Through the chair to Councillor Behan, the goal for administration is to increase the revenues at the Sister Kennedy Centre by $10,000. These are some of the ways that we are proposing to do so. And so over to Councillor Mackey's consideration, we can take this conversation to the Sister Kennedy Advisory Committee, and we can look at some numbers that we can bring forward to propose at a fee bylaw update before bringing these fees into practice at the Sister Kennedy Center. Again, with that goal of a minimum of $10,000 increase in revenues through these kinds of conversations in terms of staying below these maximum thresholds that I had provided in the report.
So is it fair to say, Manager Young, then, that we could keep the $10,000 in revenue and adjust the prices of the things that Councillor McTaggart was speaking of, the meals and so on, downward, and still keep that $10,000?
If that is what council wants us to do, that is definitely the way we can proceed.
So I'm assuming the council would want to see, if we keep the $10,000 revenue, what the prices would look like with that. Is that fair to say, council? Yeah, I'm getting nods on that. But council, are you in principle in favor of trying to keep the revenue at $10,000, with the caveat that if there's something drastic, we may need to change that? Okay. Anything else on this? I'm just trying to make sure that we give administration enough direction here. So we've I think got the direction on the Sister Kennedy. Councillor Bernetta?
Just one more thought. As you noticed, the profits or any profits we make at the marina, a portion of them must be paid back to the MNR for a lease agreement of sorts. Yes. We have taken this to the ministry previously to see if they would allow us out of that agreement. And I think it's something we should follow up on. It's not a lot of money, but I think it's silly for us to have to pay rent to the MNR for our own marina. So I think it's something we should follow up on. Thanks.
Could be a topic of a future delegation. Councillors, I think administration is going to want a little more instruction on what you would like done with the fees, the launch fees at the Sorting Gap Marina. I think Councillor Burnett has suggested that the launch fees go from $9 to $10. So I'm getting nods on that. Is there any other suggestions that you'd like to give to administration on this? Any other information you'd like? Okay. All right. Need to confer one more time with the clerk. On what? The council will receive the report. Yeah. And with the direction provided. Okay, thank you for that discussion. It was a very thorough discussion, very helpful, gave some good guidance. I have a recommendation that says that council will receive report AR-24-0523 as information and with the direction provided. Could I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Behan. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Okay, that brings us then to the capital budget item 4.3, and I guess we're back to you, Madam Treasurer.
Okay, so, oops, went the wrong way. So since we're coming here tonight anyways to discuss budget, we figured we would bring forward the capital budget changes since our November 20th meeting. The airport plow truck was not received until February, so we've added that as a carry forward item. And same with the PLC upgrade at Church Street, that was missed as a carry forward item, so added $75,000 there. The two items that were pulled from the operating budget, the Point Park tree replacement for $5,000 is added, as well as the fire cabinet for the equipment dryer of $17,000. Further to that, there were the RFP for the vehicles had gone out with some changes, so those items are changed. And a high lift pump replacement, which Craig had brought the report forward on that earlier this year. So the total change to the capital budget is $498,600. So it went from $19,690,373 up to $20,188,973.
Thank you for that update, Madam Treasurer. Councillors, do you have any questions or comments on this? Councillor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I just noticed on all the changes we had all have to come out of reserves, or the bulk of them. There's none, we had no other federal grants or provincial grants that could cover that. And the others, it went from $299,000 to $284,000, so it looks like we lost $15,000 there for some reason. But I just want to, in my own mind, clear that all these changes are coming out of reserves, the various reserves, as opposed to any help from grants. Thank you.
Madam Treasurer.
Yes, they are. We did receive a grant, though, for the airport plow truck a couple of years back now, so we had stuck it into the reserves line at that point.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the capital budget, councillors? Madam Treasurer, any further comments from you? Okay, then I have a resolution on that. Recommendation reads that council approve the revised 2024 capital budget as presented. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bien, Councillor Bernetta. Any further discussion on the capital budget? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. No one is opposed. Yeah. So just to kind of summarize, we've made some, we've given administration some direction, and I suspect they'll need some time to incorporate that into the budget. So we're going to require another budget meeting. Is that fine with you, Council? And then also, just so everyone's clear, some of these changes that you've suggested are going to increase the cost of the budget a bit. So it's likely that the final increase for residential is going to be somewhere between 5.5% and 6%, just so that you're aware of that and, you know, have an appetite for that. Any further questions or comments on our meeting tonight before I look to close? Madam Treasurer?
I think we're going to need a meeting date because there's no other ones scheduled.
Very true. Do you have a suggestion, and should we carry on with our pattern, which has been each Monday when there's not a council meeting? Is that enough time? Or please say so if it's not, because we can.
I think given what we have here, it probably is.
So what would, you have a calendar? What would the date be?
18th.
March 18th. So council, appetite for a budget meeting on March 18th? Administration, you're okay with that? I need a nod from somebody. Yeah, I got a shrug and a nod. They're okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you. That was some work. The recommendation reads, oh, Manager Young?
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to add in that there's not a Sister Kennedy advisory meeting scheduled until April. And so I wanted to put that in there that I'll do my best to confer with the chair and the committee on some suggestions for these Sister Kennedy fees to bring forward. And I will bring in Councillor McTaggart and Councillor Mackey on those conversations.
Thank you very much. Anything else? All right. Recommendation reads that having reached the hour of 6:53, that this meeting of the Council of the Town of Fort Frances be now closed. Mover and seconder, Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Mackey. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, and especially you, administration. Thank you very much.